Coming up on AVANT, Technology Insights with Ken Presti.
It is a journey and a destination all kind of in itself.
Today, we're taking a closer look at digital transformation, ranging from cloud adoption and other technical matters all the way to people, processes, and back-end operations. There's also a distinct possibility that you might learn a little something about beer, but that's what happens when Bill Franklin and I get together. Stay tuned. Welcome to AVANT Technology Insights. I'm your host, Ken Presti, Research Vice President of AVANT Research and Analytics. The link between solving business challenges and cutting-edge technologies has become tighter and more complex than ever before. In this podcast series from AVANT Research and Analytics, we help enterprise decision makers sort through the business case, the value, the challenges, and ultimately the bottom line of technology adoption. So listen to us at your desktop, take us in the car, tune in from the commuter train, or download us at the gate. You'll find us on Apple, Spotify, and Google, as well as at www.goavant.net/podcast. My guest today has more than 10 years of technology sales experience in both hardware and software. His background includes cloud, colo, storage area networks, network-attached storage, virtualization, disaster recovery, and a whole lot more. He's currently the Senior Director of Cloud Engineering at AVANT. I'm talking about my good friend, Bill Franklin. So, Bill, thank you very much for joining us today. The topic of the hour, if you will, or the half hour, is digital transformation, which is one of the key buzzwords we hear in the industry these days and something that's near and dear to our hearts at AVANT. Why don't you tee me up for starters, giving me a sense of what digital transformation is and maybe a little bit about how cloud migration fits in as a piece of that?
Yeah, it's been a very hot topic the last 6 years at AVANT is what's the difference between cloud migrations and digital transformation? And really, I always look at digital transformation as the whole encompassing company. We're doing this as a company, meaning everybody's got to be bought in. So you have people and processes, you have all the applications are eventually probably going to go there. We don't know on what timeline, but that then encompasses some sort of a migration path of the actual application. But if you think of digital transformation, that's a thought process from board and executive team members. And really, because of what we went through from a pandemic and COVID, getting out of that data center business and into a more beneficial avenue. And that is a big subject in a lot of different IT organizations and honestly, every company out there.
So is it your opinion, would you predict that the days of the traditional enterprise data center, as we've already known it, are those days numbered, or do you think there's always going to be a place for the data center as well?
You're touching on a subject that one of our major players out there, Equinix, wrote a nice paper on. But the definition of enterprise data center is kind of an enterprise going out and building their own. That's different than the co-location or secondary kind of data center market out there. Mm-hmm. And what you just touched on as an industry has been evolving big time, meaning 80% of all enterprise organizations are going to get rid of their own data center. Like, why are we in the data center business? Why did I build one? It doesn't make sense because Equinix and hundreds of other data centers out there have pre-built this model and get these cloud on-ramps and help enable my cloud migration and digital transformation process. So why don't I move there, which is a lot of times internet rich and really enveloping of what I want to do. That makes more sense. And we've seen an explosion of data center and co-location market up. And obviously that cloud transformation goes along with it. So yes, the enterprises are getting rid of their own data centers at a very rapid pace. But as we know, they aren't all going into the cloud. They're actually going to a lot of our data center markets.
Okay, I can see how that would be. So as the enterprise decision maker takes a look at these different options, and there's different ways of going about it from a technical perspective. There's different vendors out there that will help you in different ways. Um, Tee up for me, if you don't mind. What are some of the things that these people, the decision makers, need to initially put on the table and start laying out in terms of these are the needs that have to be met, these are the options at hand, and how do we go about sorting through what's best for me?
It, you just asked $1 million question, which honestly nobody has an answer for.
Okay,
But
I was just going to say I won't take your check.
yeah, yeah, right. But in that, I've kind of had an analogy along with it. And if you're ever doing home construction, right, you always measure 3 times, cut once. So in that planning, analyzing, and getting all the assets together are so important. So I've kind of come up with an analogy. If we can kind of bake out your workloads and applications into 2 modes. Actually, I know your background's from IDC, but Gartner came out with a great uh, a, a great just discussion point for IT. And in that, they got 2 modes. Mode one is kind of a traditional workload. Doesn't really do a whole lot. It's mass produced. I can really kind of cut and paste, and they're non-linear, so they don't really move and be dynamic. And I call them, in my analogy correlates to beer. So they're kind of my Miller Lite, Bud Light, Coors Light. So mass produced. If I go to Florida, it's the same thing. If I go to California, it's the same thing. They're mass produced, and really they don't offer me a lot of, you know, eclectic natures, different tastes, different, just all the stuff that now mode two is presenting out there, which are very dynamic in nature. They have different hops. They're darker. They're richer. Now you have summer brews. You have a lot of mixtures together. Mode two is more revenue driving for organizations. So I'll take a step back, and if that might have confused you, I hope not. But if I take a
No,
step
I think that makes sense because when you're looking at it from the standpoint of products like that, there are certain products that you can buy them anywhere, and what they're selling there is the consistency. It's not so much the different varieties at hand. It's the you know what you're going to get no matter where you are. It's going to be the same thing, and there's a certain comfort level in that.
Yep.
Whereas what I'm also hearing you say is that there's a second way to look at it, where you're looking at different types of differentiators and different modes of doing business, where it might be more compatible with what your needs based on your ability to pick and choose different elements of it.
Yeah, and I'll take it even a step further. Mode two generally are your high-end databases, your CRMs, your ERPs, your web apps, something that is very dynamic, and you want it to be dynamic too. And your IT teams are struggling with the consistency there because now they're going to have testers, they're going to have developers, they're going to have quality assurance, and even maybe some backups of all of that. So now you're having 3 or 4 environments to support one production workload. That is a monster task to be able to keep all of those platforms on the same code, the same ability to honestly have one tester do something and another one do another one and another one do another one. Those are all operations that are a struggle for IT to keep and maintain a infrastructure in a legacy data center, right? There's a lot of equipment that needs to be done. So what they've done is come out and say, well, I would really like, and then going back to the beer analogy, would love to be able to have something producing, but I don't know what I want to produce. I want to be able to test this out. Should I add more hops? Should I not? Should I add more bourbon barrel stout and oatmeal and all that? Should I not? I need to really experiment a lot, and that's what developers do. But you're only as good in the beer world as the quantity that you can make. So if you go to one of those craft brews and you look back behind the scenes, you see all these smaller vats. Why? Because they're testing it out. They're seeing if this could actually be a thing. And so when you go to them, you're like, hey, test this out. Do you like it? Do you not? Should I make more of it? Should I not? I don't know. That's exactly what a lot of times AWS, Azure, GCP, and having that ability to spring up and spring down, make things, break things. But at the end of the day, it's not really costing me a huge production workload. It's just costing me a little bit. And but I and but I've enabled all of my testers, my developers, and everything else to spring it up, spring it down. And now I've built automation across this whole thing. If you ever get into some of these cool little terms, Kubernetes and containers and blah, 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 at the end of the day, what they're doing is basically, I have the ability to say, I want a Bill Franklin brew. You know what I mean? I want to go in there and have Bill Franklin, and the guy goes, I got your mixture. Boom, here you go. And in seconds, you have the Bill Franklin beer. But now you have thousands of other Bill Franklins out there that all want their own brew. Imagine having that ability to do that in seconds. That
Okay,
is
so take that analogy and work it back to IT. So, okay, you've got all the different, you're talking about hops and barley. Now, when the IT companies start to do that, and you mentioned a couple of them in terms of Kubernetes, et cetera, but what are you seeing as the types of variables that are getting weighed out in terms of figuring out what the perfect mix would be, if you will?
yeah, that's interesting because everybody brings their own biases. Everybody brings their own skills and talents to the table from an IT organization. They not everybody goes out and says, I want to buy people. I want to buy an IT a service delivery person, an MSP, or not everybody does that. So you're going to have to weigh a lot of options. Maybe somebody already has skill and capability in a language or an automation, and they've already been maybe playing outside of purview of IT, meaning they had shadow IT out there already doing it and you didn't know about it. So now you just want to kind of containerize them, lack of a better term, and be like, hey, man, actually work with IT, InfoSec, and other people out there to bring that about. So choosing the right platform and some of these variables in there could be skills and talent, could be your security team is already familiar with one of them. You already have a direct route. You already have a networking operations around it. There's a few pieces of the puzzle that could easily segment out one or the other.
Okay, so back in the old days, and I hate to sound like an old gray hair by asking this question in that context, but I remember when cloud was first coming up, and digital transformation in a larger sense. But it was at that point, it was a lot about the cloud, and it was, do I want to give up the control? Is the security there? These days, it's got to be a very different dialogue because they recognize that there's still an element of control. They recognize the security aspects and have made a decision on that one way or the other. Aside from that mix, okay, and looking in terms of digital transformation as a big chunk, what would you say are the main things that people are struggling with these days in terms of making those choices and probably along the lines of the things that most people wouldn't have expected might be an issue when they first started out, and suddenly they get an education?
So I kind of correlate this conversation to, Ken, you're in and around Chicago. We know the market pretty well. But if I were to say, hey, Ken, come to my house, I'm having a party this weekend, what would be the first thing you did?
What would be the first thing I would do? I would look at my calendar and make sure I was available.
Yep. And then you would hit on that day, you would hit Waze or Google Maps or
Right.
whatever, right?
Hmm.
That's exactly the way people need to kind of think of this is it is a journey and a destination all kind of in it itself. And if you're building a new IT environment, literally kind of doing that, right?
Hmm.
There's a few building blocks that you need to have. And I've seen what's left off the table and or because of the planning and budgets and timelines. Too many people thought they knew something when they didn't. Going back to my Google Maps, you're like, Bill, you're northwest of me. I can just figure it out from there. And you're like, slow down. I'm in a small town. I'm really, behind a lot of things, meaning, there's a jewel by there's a few wonky curves. You just don't know where you're going. So you go to the Google Maps. And what you're
Hmm.
always going to come back to is there's a few variables that you never saw coming, mainly security. Security is paramount when you start moving workloads out behind your firewall and into a new platform that does have quote unquote best practices, but are you truly secured? You're in the security world, they call it a threat vector. And I know you've
Hmm.
done a few podcasts with like Ray Watson and a few others that are just unbelievable when they get in front of people. They tell, unbelievable stories, and I love them because they give me silver bullets around that. And I always use, now your threat vector has expanded behind your firewall to now AWS, now to unified communications, now to Office 365. Now you're on that full digital transformation. And how are you going to see everything that's going on? You can't. Nobody can. This is
Right.
what's been happening in the marketplace. So security has been huge with a open discussion, right? That no right way to do things other than kind of have a framework around it. That's why you'll hear NIST and all these other ones out there. But your main point is, what are some things that we've always come back to and missed? I would say security is number one by far. The other one is very interesting. It's the networking piece. Simple as, I have people over here, I want to attach them over here. What's the best way to do that, right? And this has been exploding with SD-WAN and redesigning networks, because now workloads aren't backhauled. They're actually out there in the cloud world. Okay, well, what's the best method to get my users or my customers to that site, to that application? And oh my gosh, that opens up a unbelievable conversation that we love to have. And that has been what, in your 612 report, right? The rate of disruption, the network was by far number one because of the cloud, because workloads are now moving, and legacy MPLS is 30-year-old technology. It was never built to have cloud. Now we have to redesign the network in order for users to access the cloud, which is great. But I might hold up my digital transformation because my users are complaining. My users are complaining because now I've moved a workload and now they have extra hops. That's not good. So we didn't plan it out properly, right? Simple as security and networking are the two paramount things that we've always just come back to. And that's why the engineering team, I would say our SD-WAN capabilities have been exploding the last 2 years because of all these different scenarios.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, a big part of this, at least a big part of doing it well, is about looking at all the permutations, talking to different people within your organization to find out what they need, and then probably tabletopping it to figure out what's going to happen when Fred over here does this and Jane over there does that, and trying to figure out, exactly what's going to happen and what the different impacts are going to be. Because one of the things I could see myself doing as an enterprise buyer is looking at you and saying, Bill, I get the value proposition of the cloud. I recognize that security is a really important thing here, but I'm basically laying here in the fetal position, brother, because there's nothing because there's nothing I can do that's going to make this absolute. I can maximize my odds. And how do I go about how am I going to sleep at night after I do this?
So you just touched on one of the big four-letter words that every IT organization says on a day-to-day basis that we don't talk enough about. That four-letter word is risk. What is the
Okay,
risk?
good. I was hoping it wasn't going to be a different
Yeah.
one, but that's good. Okay, good.
Yep. I'm trying to keep it PC, but risk is just a open conversation that if I do something different, what am I introducing into that equation that could risk either, yes, security or networking or user accessibility and everything, right? You have to plan that out. Risk of doing nothing is still a risk. Risk of changing something, and what you just talked about, which I love, I know you and Brent Wilford on the last one talked about, let's poll our users. Let's poll them. What do they like? What do they not like? Everything else. And we do the same thing in application workloads. We encompass the business owner. So, hey, we're looking at moving this to cloud. How do you access it? What do your users like about it? What do they not like? Imagine it over here and putting a plan together so it encompasses them. Absolutely. Because if I move a workload to the cloud and that business owner didn't understand what I was doing, I introduced a lot of risk, and that person might have a lot of influence in the organization, and I just kind of cut my knees off. I don't want to do that. So yes, digital transformation encompasses business owners or application owners, developers, testers, networking, security, and everything under the covers. That's why you do see, hopefully, not anyone in a fetal position, but it's very overwhelming today. And if we can compartmentalize things, this is going to your original conversation that me and you always have, is why are people still in data centers? Why are still people going to colo? What is going on here? It is because it envelops all things in terms of IT, and we have to mitigate risk to the business. That is a huge topic that we don't talk enough about.
So does this all correlate to the hybrid movement where it's like, okay, I don't have full trust on either side of the equation, but I'll try a little bit here and a little bit there, and I'll allow myself to be won over or lost depending on how things go. So do you view in that respect the hybrid approach as something that has legs over the long haul, or is this people really just kind of getting their act together and getting their comfort level together and trying to figure out what they might have overlooked?
Yeah, I kind of come back to painting with a broad brush a little bit from who you're talking to. If this is a
Mhm.
agent community and you're asking the business, like, how long you been in business? Oh, 5 or 6 years. Most times those customers started in the cloud, right? Why would I ever build a data center? The last 5 years, internet's rich. It's very easy to access this information. But if you're talking to a customer that's over 10 years old and they might have had a culture and they have a data center and infrastructure and everything, now those are going to be hybrid for a long, long time. And the main reason isn't because cloud isn't available, it's very readily available. Now you're dealing with depreciation of assets, culture, IT skill sets. You're dealing with, just an eclectic ball of a bag of goods that you're juggling as an IT leader. I've even had people in the battle lab, a customer come in and say, "We're on this digital transformation." I'm like, "Okay, I'm your guy. I'm along for the ride. I can absolutely help at any interval." And he goes, "Well, let me just tell you, I'm going to need your help because I do not expect relatively about 20 to 30% of my IT team to be here in the next year or two. They're stubborn. They don't have a skill set that I need in this transformation. So I have to mitigate against that and know that I can get either a new employee or a managed service provider to augment that." So if a company has a legacy culture, infrastructure, data center, and everything, the hybrid world is going to be around a long, long time, which is really good for us as thought leaders in the AVANT ecosystem to talk all different avenues. Go lift and shift, right? Go into the
Mhm.
cloud. You're going to probably need some skill sets there. But why not just piecemeal workloads like mode two?
Mhm.
Go get some craft beer, make sure it's the right one for you, but all these other ones that really shouldn't be in a public cloud or mode one, right? Those ones that are just like Miller Lite, Coors Light, you don't need hyperscaler. You need either your own vCenter server or someone else's that can help manage that ecosystem and cost benefit analysis for yourself so you know your expenses every month. And they're really not going to change much. So CFOs really like that, by the way, right? So I walk through that with customers, and that's why the battle lab and me being in front of them greatly enables there's a lot of different situations. Why don't we start compartmentalizing? What are you trying to accomplish? And I always get back to it. And hopefully, we got a couple more minutes, but my mentality when I get into this, I don't know if you're familiar with the IT thought leader out there. His name is Simon Sinek.
Mhm.
Um, he's absolutely incredible. I try and watch his videos. I read a couple of his books, but in every setting that I get into with IT, customers, thought leaders, whoever, Simon Sinek wrote a book called "Start with Why." And when they say I want to go to cloud, I'm one of the people that goes, "Well, why? Tell me your business objectives. What is the outcome you're trying to experience?" And then us put some outcome-based solution architecting in place. Because if you can't answer why and you just go somewhere, you can never point back to the reason why you moved. That doesn't make sense to anybody. But if you start with why are we doing it, what are the business objectives, what are the outcomes, and define a reason and a process, the success will bake itself out. We're absolutely on board with that. But in every opportunity, whether it's around SD-WAN or security or cloud migrations or whatever, I'm one of the people in there going, why are we doing this? Just
Hmm.
just want to make sure I'm on the right page, because if you don't have an objective, plus you don't have an executive leadership telling you to go there, you're just kind of fishing out there for a reason to go to cloud. It's not going to be a successful outcome. That's been baked out over the last 6 years that I've been in this digital transformation world.
So I can totally get what you're saying about why, because the extension of that is to establish how you're going to assess what's successful and what's not. A lot of people are going to be coming to this in cooperation with a trusted advisor, and it's real easy to look at that situation and say, okay, the trusted advisor is going to take care of me and represent me and help me make these decisions. But it's also true that in order to get the most out of my trusted advisor, I've got to be able to establish not only the why, but I've also got to be able to bring to the equation the answers to the questions, the other questions that the trusted advisor is going to ask in order to properly represent me and help put me in a position to make the correct decisions. What are some of the things that I need to do to help that along? What are some of the questions that you haven't covered yet that I know I'm going to need to answer? If I can't answer them off the top of my head, I need to be able to bring in the right people who can answer those questions and facilitate the trusted advisor in helping me.
Yeah, and there's a great open conversation to be had. Where are you at? And one of my friends in the industry kind of always says, on an odometer or a cloudometer is what he calls it, right? Are you at the 1? Are you at the 100? Pretty much everybody's at that cloudometer and somewhere in the middle. And if I'm getting that, if I'm asking the trusted advisor to help me along, right? Well, where am I at and where do I want to be? So I always get back to the keys of success, and then what to have prepared for that. Define success. What are the timelines, the business drivers? We were just chatting about that. The whys and the prioritization of that. And then what's next? So that's usually at the executive team. And if I were to talk openly to a customer, I'm like, who's behind this? What kind of an executive, whether it's CIO, CTO, CFO, right? Who's the main buyer of this digital transformation, and why are we doing that? If I can get that down, all the other pieces are going to be a little bit more technical, and we're going to try and orchestrate that technical conversation. Meaning, have we done any preparedness? Have we mapped out applications that we think are ready to go to cloud? Have you already gone to Office 365 and ServiceNow and some of the major SaaS players? Have you already done that? Have you put some building blocks in place? Those are all conversations that we start with before we get into, oh, you need a direct route, you need an express route, oh, data center, yeah, where you want to be, Ashburn, Virginia, and Chicago. Those are all secondary things that we're going to bring to the table because we have the portfolio of providers that are 1,600 data centers globally, hundreds of MSPs. We have unified communications, collaboration, and everything under the sun. Our portfolio represents digital transformation. The intelligence we need to bring into into the equation is starting with the executive sponsors and the reasoning why, and do we have meat behind this? The meat and potatoes, really, for me and Midwesterner and from Iowa, meat and potatoes is ingrained into my culture. My mom literally, just like every time she comes over, is like, "Are we going to get steak and potatoes tonight?" Like, "Ma, how about some fish?" She just doesn't. So if we have that, that's the meat and potatoes to me. And then we get into the technical pieces of it. And that's where you can hand off and task people with it, right? Security, networking teams. It's amazing when I get into this digital transformation, the security team and the network team, they don't even really talk to each other, right? How can that be? They are so intertwined in this cloud conversation that it's I'm actually forcing network teams a lot of times, like, who's your friendly over in the security team? Oh, it's Bob. Great. Let's get Bob into this customer. Let's get Bob into the next conversation because we need certain pieces of the puzzle. So if you can task from a customer perspective, tasking certain people with this defining success and then technical, that really enables us as trusted advisors to fit in the right technologies, the right resources, and have a proper outcome.
I really like the way you laid out that process, starting with the why and then laying out all those building blocks. I have now exited the fetal position, and I'm very appreciative of that. So, very well done. Thank you for laying that out for us. Bill Franklin, Senior Director of Cloud Engineering at AVANT. Some great insights here on digital transformation and how to pick at that Rubik's Cube in a methodical and successful way. Very much appreciate your help today, my friend. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast.
Great talking to you, Ken. Thank you.
You've been listening to AVANT Technology Insights, featuring information and opinions on how key technologies can be leveraged to solve business problems. AVANT Technology Insights is a service of AVANT Communications, a platform for IT decision-making. All opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the guests and the host. For more information, please feel free to download our research reports and other resources at www.goavant.net. That's www.goavant, as in victory, ant.net. For AVANT Research and Analytics, this is Ken Presti.